Hello, in this video, I'm going to talk about working with anger as a feature of your grief process. So stay tuned. Welcome to Wellness with John. These are resources to help you thrive. I'm John Peters. I'm a therapist who's been in practice for over 25 years, working with thousands of patients and providing mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. So in this video, I'm going to talk about anger as a feature of the grief process, but I want to share with you things that are common in terms of how people experience anger and some attitudes that people have about anger and ways that you can work with your anger so that it doesn't become more convoluted and toxic for you. And one of the reasons that I'm making this video is that there is this common idea about grief that is a holdover from the old school Kubler-Ross stage theory that anger is this essential stage of a stage modeled grief process. And I made a video about how grief doesn't happen in stages before. I'll put a link up here if you want to go watch that video. But the bottom line is that grief doesn't actually happen in stages. And the reason that I bring this point up when I'm talking about anger is that many people still have this notion that grief has stage one, stage two, stage three, stage four. And the idea in the stage model was that you had to experience each stage, they had to be in that order, and you couldn't get to the next stage unless you successfully navigated whatever stage you were in. Okay? Because people still believe that, I find that in relation to the component of anger during the grief process, that sometimes people aren't experiencing anger, but because they think that anger is an essential stage in the grief process, that somehow they aren't progressing through their grief because they aren't angry. Okay. And they're thinking, okay, anger is an essential part of grief. I'm not angry yet. So I expect to become angry, but I'm not getting angry. Therefore, I'm stuck and I'm not grieving properly. This is a common thing. And I know, people have left in the comments before on my Facebook page when I've talked about grief that nobody really believes the stage model. It really is a thing. I see this over and over and over and over in my practice. People come in with assumptions that the stage model exists, and it doesn't, okay? So the bottom line is we don't go through those stages in a neat, tidy order. And also, the stages are kind of mischaracterizations of the complex mix of what we experience during grief. And we don't have to do this stage in order to get to the next stage in order to move towards some sort of optimal resolution of our grief. It just doesn't work that way, okay? So the simple thing I want to say about anger is that if you're not angry, it's most likely the case that you don't need to be, or that you don't need to be yet. Maybe you'll get angry about something in the future, but you don't need to get angry in order to do the anger stage, all right? In order to then do the next stage and the next stage and move toward acceptance. It's simply not true, okay? And the other thing about it is that the stage model kind of said that each stage was characterized. This is the understanding. I'm not quibbling with whatever Dr. Kubler-Ross wrote or said about it. I'm just saying the common understanding is that, first you're in denial and then you're in anger as stage two. And so the implication is that stage two, anger, is kind of monochromatic in terms of emotional quality, that you're just all angry and you're not other things too, and so you're going to like somehow be subsumed into this full anger mode, and you're going to reside there long enough until you work through your anger, and then you go on to the next stage. Okay. But the thing is, if you look at any person, you, me, anybody who's going through a grief process, in any given moment, we are not generally experiencing a monochromatic, simple kind of emotional experience. Certainly there are, if you zoom in close enough, right? Like in this very instance, this millisecond, yeah, I mostly think I'm angry. But if you look at someone, let's say over a day, over a week time, you zoom out a little bit to say, I'm generally taking a look at how this person is generally doing, you don't see a simple monochromatic kind of emotional experience. It's a mix. So if you interview someone in any moment and you say, what are you feeling? Okay, maybe anger is predominant, maybe something else, sadness is predominant, whatever. But they also are experiencing other things, right? So like if someone dies in my life, I probably had a complex relationship with them that had lots of different features. And I have different thoughts and feelings about all those different ways that I related to the person. And if they die, I'm still going to have a very complex relationship with my experience of that person while they were in my life and while they were alive. Okay. Could that include sadness and anger? Yeah. But it also probably could include enjoyment and mirth and positive feelings, the types of feelings we want to have more of in our life. Right. And so the way we relate to a person while they're alive or a pet, and the way we relate to them after they die or they're gone is always multifaceted, okay? Frustration and anger are normal parts of experiencing human social relationships, both while someone's in our life and after they're gone. And therefore, it's going to be a mix of things, right? So, point so far number one, you don't have to do anger to do grief well. Number two, if you're angry, you probably are other things, right? And you don't have to do anger in a particular way or even be angry at all in order to optimally get through your grief process. I see lots of people who go through grief and anger doesn't really show up at any point as a real prominent feature, right? Now, another thing that trips people up with anger in the grief process is that sometimes people are angry about their situation post change or loss, or they're angry at the person who is gone, that died or left them, or however they're gone. And then they think they want to reject the anger because it's not okay, right? So, for example, this shows up commonly as someone thinking, I'm angry at this person who died, and it's not okay. It's not okay with me that I'm angry at them. I shouldn't be angry at a dead person. I shouldn't be angry at this person I lost, because the predominant attitude toward the person is I'm sad that they're gone, right? Or I felt sad about the way that they died, or what, there's this sadness quality of grief, and people think anger is incompatible with that, and it's not fair. So basically, if you're experiencing anger after a change or a loss, look closely to see if in your own head, or maybe even in the messages you get from other people, that there's a should. You should not be angry. It's not okay to be angry at this person, all right? Because 99.9% of the time, then when we unpack that and we say, well, what are you angry about? This generally leads to something where the person thinks, actually, it is a thing a reasonable person would be angry about, right? So I'll give you a recent example, of I talked with someone who was married for decades, lost their spouse, and they are now very frustrated with their life in multiple ways, because they had expected to continue to live together. They didn't want to lose their spouse, and then survive after that alone. And they are thinking thoughts like, well, I'm so old that I'm not going to have another spouse. I can't replace that person. And I'm angry about that because I wanted more of the enjoyment of my life together with my spouse. I'm angry about that, and I'm angry at them for dying on me. And because if they hadn't died, I wouldn't be experiencing this. And so I'm mad at them for dying, right? And then they turned that inward because of a and it turned into shame, because I'm not supposed to be mad at this person for dying. It wasn't their fault, right? It wasn't something that was under their control. Obviously, if they had control over it, they wouldn't have died. So I'm bad for being angry at this person for doing something that a reasonable person wouldn't think that they would have done differently, which is magically stay alive. Um, And so then they get into this convoluted shame cycle with, okay, I'm angry about this, but I can't, I don't have a proper target of my anger because I have this should that says I shouldn't be mad at them, and I didn't do anything, so I can't target myself for the anger, and I can't target the universe. Sometimes people target God and say, God, why did you do this to me? You're punishing me for something. But then punishment leads someone back into guilt and shame, right? So a common pitfall of the way people experience and then respond to anger in the grief process is to turn it into shame. Okay. And even shame just because I'm not supposed to be angry, uh, because even though people understand anger is that conventional idea that it's an essential component of grief, when people actually feel anger, they often feel icky and think, this is wrong. I'm not supposed to be doing this. Okay. But the reality is, if you're angry about some frustrating aspect of a loss or the life that you are accommodating to after a change or a loss, you are normal. You are absolutely normal, right? It is normal to be frustrated with challenges in life. It's normal to be frustrated with losing something that you loved or desired or enjoyed. It's absolutely normal. And it doesn't mean that you are doing something wrong, right? Now, it's true if someone is in a mode of anger that's not turning into shame, but they're stuck in it for months and months and months, that certainly is not an enjoyable place to be in. And there's sometimes are reasons that people get stuck like that. And if you're having confusion about your grief process now, or if you do in the future, or if you have a friend who is, obviously one good thing that you can do is see a competent therapist who has experience working with issues of grief, who can help you both experience it in a way that you optimally surf the complexity of it, but also that you do it in a way that doesn't cause you to get stuck somewhere, or that doesn't cause it to turn into something like toxic shame around a very natural aspect of the grief process. Obviously, I'm biased because I'm a therapist, but the reality is I've worked with so many people over the years who have gotten remarkable relief from a pretty limited number of sessions of just talking with someone to give them a space to talk openly about their grief. And it often is extremely supportive and healing to talk with a competent therapist about your grief, because usually you have the capacity to do it, but the therapy process just helps that innate inner capacity work better for you, right? So that's one recommendation, is consider talking to a therapist if you're feeling stuck in your grief, because sometimes there are attitudes and ideas about the situation that can either prolong or maintain the grief process, or as I mentioned earlier, they can kind of twist it into more toxic elements like shame that then make the grief worse rather than better for you. Okay. But takeaway here is anger is normal. It's not essential. So if you're not angry, you're okay. But you don't want anger to turn into shame if you can avoid that, because it is normal and you are okay, even if you're mad at somebody who died on you, or you're mad at your pet for dying on you, or you're mad at some change in your life because it changed and now you're experiencing some frustration related to that change, right? It's about being in a mode of acceptance and realizing that I am in a frustrating situation right now, and frustration is normal when you're in a frustrating situation. So if you like this kind of content, please hit the like button below. If you have yet to subscribe, please subscribe, because it helps me to grow my channel. And stay tuned for future videos, because I'm going to be publishing more on a wide range of topics to help you thrive, including more videos on the topic of grief. So stay tuned.